I'd like to call to order the work session for Tuesday, February 25th, 2025. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Correll,
Here, on time.
Councilmember Falkingham,
Here.
Councilmember Garcia, Mayor Greenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Homa,
Here.
Councilmember Maddox.
Here.
Councilmember Page. Okay, Mayor Greenberg, a quorum is present.
Thank you. First order of business is to address the Design and Review Board vacancy. We have a candidate, and hopefully everyone had a chance to review his qualifications. And does anyone have any concerns or questions?
I have no concerns. Looks well qualified.
Okay. So item number 4 is the sewer lateral fund sustainability. Anthony, did you want to start off that conversation?
Sure. First of all, we appreciate all the council's additional questions and inquiries before, so we can try to get as much addressed as possible. We've talked about the sewer lateral running a deficit for many years now, so we're looking for some sort of solution to try to bring up some revenues. We've done as much background, I think, hopefully, as the council can get. We're trying to give a variety of different options. The main problem is the $50 max has been in place for decades, and unfortunately, if that doesn't go up, we just have to look for alternative methods. We've always tried to stretch out the program as much as possible by doing as much in-house work. We do all the excavation and we do all the restoration. And as Jason's become superintendent, we've even done more actual connections as well. So we try to do as much in-house as possible. It's clearly cheaper when we do so as opposed to contracting it out. But we have limited resources, so as you can look at with these projections, in the past, historically, we would borrow frequently from the general fund, $25,000 here, $10,000 here. I believe Sean and Barry were here when maybe about 6 years ago, when the council at the time wanted us to use capital development funds, and we were, for the first time in probably a decade, able to actually catch up. The problem is, and Amber and Lexi can address that, our auditor has basically said we need to find other sources of revenue. We can't continue to borrow from the capital development funds. So that's kind of left us where we are right now. We have 26 on the list right now. Jason and I have crunched the numbers. We believe 60 is a good estimate, and that's really what it is. It's an estimate. We looked at trends and some of the historical figures. We believe that you'll see some numbers. Sometimes the years will jump, but a lot of times those laterals will have come in the prior fiscal year, and we just did more because funds became available. So we're looking for some more stability in this account so we don't have to borrow from other funds. Hopefully over time, maybe the state will either allow us to increase that $50 limit, or as more and more homes go through the sale process and these repairs become fixed. I think Jason figures, rough estimate, we've probably done 1,000 homes since this since this program's been around, potentially 800. And obviously they've been cambered and scoped and fixed, so hopefully just by the homes turning over a number of times, we don't have as many. But we still feel 60 would be considered a conservative number. And so we drew all of our projections based off an estimated 60 laterals each year. I don't know, there are pros and cons to the various options. If you're asking my opinion, I kind of like a combination of potentially an upfront cost to kind of spread the pain a little bit, and then our cap could go up a little higher. But there's a number of options. The property tax obviously is obviously, it's never really a popular alternative, but that could offset labor cost if we did that. Does anyone have any questions on that? We just tried to present alternatives, and we're also hoping we're not necessarily expecting an answer tonight, obviously. We're just looking for a couple of different options, and maybe if you want additional research done by staff, we can dig into any numbers you believe is necessary. Because we understand this is gonna be probably an unpopular decision, no matter what, we're passing costs back on to residents. I've talked with Amber, I've talked with Jason internally. Anyone that's on the list, we would still keep the 100% funding. We're not gonna change midstream when we've told people, yeah, don't worry, we'll cover this cost, this qualifies, and then go back and then tell them they need to pay a fee. We think that's only fair. But as part of the budgeting process, we're trying to get out ahead of the budgeting process so we can get an answer, so we can make some hopefully lasting changes with this. Jason or Amber, do you have anything else to add, or Lexi?
I have a couple questions. I know I appreciate the work and the research done. I posed a bunch of questions already, so thanks for getting answers to a lot of those. I'm curious, you know, I asked a question about the benchmark to even have the work done and have you guys say, yes, this makes sense. Is there ever a time where you get a video and a request that you say, yeah, we need to do this, and then when you open it up, we really didn't need to? And you already have it all opened up, so you guys go ahead and do it. The reason for the question is I'm wondering if it would make sense for us to have camera equipment to do that on our own and charge an upfront cost, so then the homeowner doesn't have to pay $300 or $400 to get that done.
We do. We bought a camera 2 years ago.
Yeah, we do have camera equipment, but we don't do the initial camera work.
You do the inspection afterward.
We bought the camera for if we get into a hole where it was blocked and we didn't have full, we couldn't scope the entire line. The initial camera work didn't scope the entire line. Once we dig that repair out, then we can go in and scope the rest of the line. We do that.
Okay.
Yeah, during the jobs, because we don't want to dig the hole twice, obviously, or if we need to go further, that's when we make that determination.
If we did some sort of initial offset payment or upfront cost, do you have a suggestion for what you would want that to be? Or what, I mean, where would we start? I guess that's up to us to decide, but you know more about the ins and outs of how often this is happening and what, I mean, I'm just wondering if it'd be comparable to what people are paying for that. If they're still gonna be required to do the camera inspection and submit the video, that's an upfront cost. Then there'd be another one to the city. A lot of times if it's a real estate transaction, people are fixing this inside, which is $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $8,000, depending on the linear footage of pipe you're replacing and whether you get it lined or tear up your basement floor. So I'm just trying to think about what makes sense here. And I think we're seeing more of these because of the real estate transactions. And so since we don't have good data on that, we're seeing more because of real estate transactions. That's why it's ticking up. But we don't know a proportion. But if there's an associated cost with the real estate transaction and potentially doing something inside, then homeowners are bearing a larger burden for potentially the lateral as well as work inside for the real estate transaction. So I get it. I know we need to do something. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what makes the most sense.
Personally, I two options stand out pretty clear to me. One of them is actually raising taxes. If a homeowner knows that, you know, I'm gonna pay an extra $30 a year, $40 a year, and my sewer lateral is gonna be covered, that's not a huge expense over the lifetime of a house. You know, it could be a couple $1,000s maybe, you know, as long as somebody lives here. And if you get your lateral replaced, it's paid for. But I can see the other side too, and I kind of like what Rock Hill does without the upfront cost, where they charge, you know, the homeowners good to $10,000 up to some cap like $4,500, which would actually cover us. But I would also put in a rider in there that if there's street repairs that need to be done because of it, make that cap like $8,000, $8,000 or $9,000. I think there's a couple of examples in there. So, and then the homeowner being
Concrete
responsible for
work
the rest.
is absolutely what can really, in depth of excavation, those two variables can really increase cost. Do you want to talk a little bit about when we get a very deep excavation, how we typically contract those out?
So, yeah, typically the last 3 or 4 years, we've obviously had a lot of turnover as far as retirement. So we've had a pretty young staff. So I haven't felt comfortable to put these younger, inexperienced staff in deeper holes. So we have been contracting those out. We've been pretty much negotiating that with Tope per job. They give me an estimate. If it's, in line with what they've been doing, then we go ahead and do it. Our guys will assist on the job, so they'll do the hauling or any materials to bring that cost down.
Right.
Again, inserting our guys in there to bring that cost down, to make sure we're getting it done, still in a reasonable amount.
What's a deep excavation? More than
Most
6
common are
feet?
probably 7 to 8, but in my 25 years, we've been 14 feet deep at some points.
Wow.
Does the city own a trench box? Are we
We
using?
do have a trench box.
Okay,
yes.
I have a question
say
to
no more
the
on that.
longevity of the repair. Is this something that when we repair it, it's going to last for 30 years, 50 years?
PVC and the lining material lining material is.
It'll outlast the house.
I've asked for warranty and they give me 50 years.
Okay,
So, which tells me they're pretty confident that it's gonna last
okay.
There is a
all of our
caveat to that.
lifetime, so.
One caveat is, the area we did the actual repair, we don't replace the entire lateral, we just replace a large portion of it.
We spot repair.
Yeah,
Now, most repairs are like for lining, when I turn in a liner, even though there may be only one broken spot that's open and flowing, but can be lined, I still have to order a minimum of 10 feet. So, and then it goes into, well, if I'm only 2 or 3 feet away from the MSD main, of course, I'm gonna line that extra 2 or 3 feet so that we're good and we don't ever have to dig that up. So there's a little bit of preventative lining going on.
Okay.
But obviously I'm trying to do a lot. But that $10,
Yeah.
we didn't used to have that 10-foot minimum, probably
Okay.
until about 4 years ago.
It's not worth it for a company to come out for less than 10 feet. That's the problem with that lining
That's the
equipment.
problem. Tope was losing. The owner called me, he's like, listen, we're losing. When I send, 3 guys out for 4 hours.
Right, to do
we're
3
only
feet,
paying
right.
for 4 feet of liner, that's, he was losing money, so.
So what you're saying typically is when you repair or put a lining in, we're not going to have to do that again to that home for
Yeah,
50
that
years
liner's
at least.
tough. That-
Yeah.
That liner is
that
actually.
I was going to say, I think for me, that changes the way that I'm looking at it, because doing a spot repair, if you have a 25-foot sewer lateral, and they're only,
Right.
and I'm not saying this in a belittling factor, but if they're only fixing 5 feet, 7 feet, 10 feet, you potentially have 20 feet that is going to need to be repaired, could need to be repaired, right? That's the anomaly. I was, in my head, thinking that we were doing a bigger repair, which makes total sense what they're saying, as opposed to how I was perceiving it. I am not in favor of a tax increase. I think that there's going to be lots of other tax increases coming on so many different other avenues. Now, hearing that factor, I think it's very important to understand that someone could potentially have multiple repairs over the lifetime of a building, right? That's the nature of having sewers, having a home, living there. And I think with that being said, the offset payment and a cap of cost probably seems like the most reasonable way. I don't know what those numbers should look like, something obviously that are cost-effective for the city, but keeping it reasonable for a homeowner. Because I was under the thought process of, well, hey, if mine's been done, right, hey, we're good, right?
Right.
Probably not necessarily true. I mean, not to say that the odds of you doing multiple repairs on one home probably doesn't happen very often, but as things get older in age, it's going to happen.
So our cost is 4,200, right, on average? Is that what I read in there? Total cost?
Average?
1917,
Yeah.
we have,
Well, the average cost is 4,200 if you include our labor, right?
oh, okay, everything
So-
income.
It doesn't include staff.
Yeah, so let's just say we make the cap 4,500. Homeowner pays 10% of that, that's $450. Plus I've got to get a camera, so it's $850. I think that's about, I think that's a decent number for,
I would agree, except thinking about the offset, right? And I'm just looking at what it says, $275. If we forego the offset because the homeowner's already paying for a camera, right? So that's, taking a little bit of that factor off, 10% with a cap of, or 10% with our cap of 4,500 sounds reasonable. I mean, I understand that, like Nick said, this could accrue, if you have internal plumbing problems and external, it's expensive. Yeah, that was
but
gonna be.
at least we're doing the, from the foundation wall out.
Right.
Right. That was gonna be my next question. Are we running into, and I'm sorry to segue off of you, Sean, are we running into concrete cost mainly from sidewalks, or is it from driveways, or is it a combination of both?
Sidewalks are not as, yeah.
Street and driveways.
The
Okay.
sidewalk's 4 inches, and they're typically a slab or two. It's when you start getting into the street and it's like a vertical curb, monolithic curb, those get much more expensive, and we typically go joint to joint on that. If you've got, think of like Zephyr Place and Richmond Place, some of those, you can really get hit hard if you have to do stairs.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm trying to think of like, some of that's, some of the concrete I own, some of the concrete you own, you know what I mean? Like, what's our more likelihood of who's paying what, where, how? I think that's a tricky one, because, yeah, if you're doing steps or an entire driveway, you could be, 15, 20 grand just in concrete, not having anything to do with the repair. So I think that's the tricky part, to even try to wrap a budget around.
Yeah, no doubt, and we can probably classify it as flat work, but again, I think that if it's a normal repair, like they did in my yard, they dig it up, line it, put a vent in it or whatever, I'm sure it cost them $4,200. It's probably pretty deep. But if they had sidewalks to do, any other flat work to do, then we should raise the cap in order to help the homeowner.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Like to 10,000, right? And if it's actually in the street, then we absorb that cost.
I agree, 100%.
And so if you have to replace steps or anything that the homeowner owns, that'll be covered with the cap. But if it's in the street, then I would say that the city absorbs that.
If we make if we, trust me, we'd like to have the cap as high as possible, but if we make the cap too high.
Right.
And we get a number of these expensive, remember, we still have limited funds.
Right.
I mean, I hate to say it.
I mean, how many?
Talking about that $2,000 cap when we put it in there, we're talking at $1,917 just for materials and supplies. That brings you to about $115,000 roughly times 60. That's where we got that number.
Right.
So I mean, if you start raising that cap too high and we get a number of those, we may be. And that's fine. We may be back here again in the future.
I mean, historically, do we have to do a lot of flat work?
Yeah.
I know, I've seen sidewalks and stuff. I haven't seen a
Yeah.
street in a while.
Sidewalks, we've done streets. And if we're on an asphalt street, that means we're doing concrete work and asphalt work, so.
Right, concrete underneath, asphalt on top.
Yeah, and my issue with the cap is, probably puts more pressure on me and my crew to do every job instead of contracting out some of the for whatever reason. I don't know if, if a homeowner looks, say we get two neighbors, we come over and do their job and we get it done for, my crew comes in and does it, for under that cap. Well, then we have to, for whatever reason, we have to contract this one out and it goes over that cap. They're gonna be like, well, why do I have to pay? My neighbor didn't, and they were, it becomes tough when you throw that cap because there's so many different variables.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that very point. So you said, these numbers have increased 2021 to present, and they're more around 60 or above. But you also said we're contracting some of those out because we've got younger crews. So if we were doing it in-house, would we do less than 60? Because then most of the numbers are well below 60 for the years you're saying we're doing it on our own. And then how does that change the cost? Because the
vast
cost.
majority of the job we are still doing in-house.
Okay, so just the.
It's the deeper holes,
Okay.
which, that, there's no average. I don't have an average of how many deep holes we've done the last 3 or 4 years, but,
Yeah, I mean, that example you're giving, if it was me and my neighbor, I would have questions about that.
Yeah,
You know?
That's that is absolutely a possible scenario. We put that in the memo. It could happen.
Yeah.
It could just be the time of year.
Sure.
Right, where maybe we're prepping parks plus the pool, right, where staff is just, busy. Leaf pickup time of year, but there's other times of year where, it's a lot easier to shift resources to the sewer laterals. And a huge difference, Councilmember Homa, is emergency repair versus there's a break in the lateral, but it's still flowing, there's no backup, and no immediate danger. Those people we would probably hold off on, but yet somebody that has sewage in their basement and we don't have it, they need it done immediately, it absolutely could cost more.
Yeah, I mean, you said 800 to 1,000 of these have been done, ballpark, and we're only looking at 2,300 residences that we're taxing for this, so we're almost halfway there, right? So I think for,
don't have multiple repairs.
Yeah, that's,
well, yeah, without
that's exactly what I was thinking, because we could go 21.6 years and be done with everything at this rate.
But-
But unfortunately, it's not the fix-all, because I was thinking the same thing, I'm like,
but for those people who've had it done in the last, 20 years and probably aren't gonna have more issues, at least with those spots you've already done, a tax increase won't be popular there, because they're paying a tax for something that they'll never benefit from. But I'm in favor of some sort of a offset payment and either a cap or a percentage, something like that, just figuring out what numbers make sense. And I like Sean's idea for adding or increasing the cap if there's, flat work or street. Seen that other places that do that. But I would need guidance from you guys on what numbers make sense and where's the sweet spot where it's gonna, give us enough fund to keep this moving and cover everything, but also not kill homeowners when they come across this.
and I think, it's inevitable, since we can't control, right, what happens, how it happens, it may be inevitable that you end up back here years down the road anyway, right? That's just anything that we ever do. Nothing's certain. But I agree. I think figuring out kind of a balance, maybe our number we're thinking isn't gonna work for you guys, and maybe your number's a little bit low than what we're thinking, and maybe just trying to find that balanced middle ground that I think is helpful to homeowners, helpful to the city, obviously, manageable and attainable for a given period of time that we can see in the foreseeable future, I think would be, I would like to see those numbers. And I don't think they have to be anything exact or perfect. We need to do something.
A good way to look at it is right now, if we capped it around 2,000, we should be able to stay relatively close to the budget. So if you want to add a,
$2,000 out of homeowner's pocket.
pardon?
Would be $2,000, right, though?
No, if we capped it at 2,000, our average lateral repair is $1,917. And so that means we would pay the majority of them in
Without a cost.
Right.
Yeah.
in
You would pay
full.
anything over 2,000.
And over 2,000, then the homeowner would pay it. So because some of these will go over, if you want to go ahead and create an upfront fee, say you wanted to do $250 or $500, well, then the cap could move up in coordination with that, so it could be $2,250 or $2,500. So, that's a simple way to look at it. If you're thinking about how high do you want to go, you need to basically adjust that initial fee accordingly. That helps. At least it gives you a ballpark. So if you want us to throw a different spreadsheet together with some ideas I'm hearing a cap plus an upfront fee. And then you
A
want us to look.
percentage, and/or a percentage
And
of
or
cap.
percentage. We can come back with some of those numbers.
Because even a $10,000 repair, 10% would be $1,000, right? And that's flat work, right? That's a good amount of flat work in it. So I still think you're still covering the homeowner. I just think it's a harsh reality that thinking that $50.
Well, would we be including, so sidewalks and streets, if you're doing the math on that, say my house, I had a sewer lateral break, and you had to take out, a 4-foot section of sidewalk and a 10-foot by 10-foot section of concrete, is that on my bill, the city's sidewalk and the city's street? Are you in?
Part of a sewer repair, we would charge that to the sewer account. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but like, so I would have to pay 10% of the city's street and the city's, see, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think I should be responsible for the city. I mean, I understand what your perspective, doesn't mean I have to agree with it, that's all I'm saying.
One issue that we haven't discussed, an idea that I'm concerned about is, should we treat our senior citizens or low-income families any differently?
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be a major cost for some people and not for other people, but I don't know how necessarily to address that, but I just wanted to bring the topic to everyone's attention, because I would like to see,
Like 65 or over, then, we'll cover,
Reduced rate,
yeah, something like that.
or,
Or minimum
you know, a
household
low-income housing number.
income threshold somewhere.
I think we definitely need to
Yeah.
explore that, that's a very good.
The 65 and over is easy because you just, your birth date, right? But for the means testing for income, then the city has to have a mechanism to verify, and that's a whole different can of worms. But I understand. I mean, I think that's a good idea. I think there's some work to flesh out the details.
I think there could be an application process for financial assistance. But anyway,
Councilmember Kroll brought up something that got me thinking, and I don't know if it's possible, because it's more of a finance question. But considering, even though the sewer lateral is causing us to repair the slab or the sidewalk, could we use capital funds to repair the street portion and the sidewalk, which means our sewer lateral funds would be untouched? Is it possible to talk with the auditor about that, or is that, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, because then that would really help with the very expensive
Right.
laterals.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
you guys ought to brainstorm that, because that would be,
Yeah.
that would be
I don't know if
huge.
it's possible, just when you said that, it made me think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that hits a middle ground, if you're able to do that. I mean, I understand we still have to pay for it.
Hold on. Okay.
Right.
We didn't need the logic right now. We were on a high note. Thank you. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah, no, you're correct, yeah.
Yeah, I would just
yeah.
task you with, I mean, you've heard what the council, cap, percentage, play around with some numbers and give us some options.
I know we're at time, and I thought I was done, but I saw a couple in here that, the research from neighboring areas that don't cover anything affiliated with a real estate transaction. And I wonder if that's something that we consider, because it feels like a majority of these, that's why people are getting an inspection. And if that cuts out a majority and we're just servicing, like, there's already money changing hands in a real estate transaction anyway. You're negotiating for these things with sellers and buyers. I just wonder what impact that might have on the fund if we limited those. I don't know.
So they buy the house and then they call up the city and say, my sewer screwed up. But to me, there's no difference between,
Well, there's a time limit on, you have to have a video that's, like, I can't send a video from 2016 to Anthony and say, like, hey, I got this video done, 8 years ago and I need it fixed. Yeah, I guess technically,
yeah, I mean, if I bought a house here and they had a camera and there was a break, I bought the house, I just call up City Hall and say, hey, I got a video from a couple weeks ago, it's broken, can you put me on the list? I mean, I'm just not sure that would curb, it's probably making your numbers increase right now, but from what I've seen in the Maplewood market, things aren't moving very fast right now, so regardless if we camera. If they camera it and there's a break, it's gonna get fixed at some point. Someone's gonna say, oh yeah, something's
And
wrong.
they paid the taxes on that property, as long as they're property tax, they paid that into that sewer lateral, whoever's been in that house for all that time, they have the right just as much as anybody, I don't know that.
do we check that and verify that we're up to date, people are up to date on taxes before, yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And we've actually had people that aren't up to date, and then they were told, we can't do it, and then they've waited on it for a couple of years and then tried to resubmit. So I mean, we monitor that pretty close.
Okay.
Cool.
and one last question, what percentage of the time does someone make a claim, we camera it and find out that the repair doesn't have to be done?
How often do I reject jobs?
Yeah.
It's rare. I mean, most of these camera work is done by licensed plumbing companies, so they have the experience and know what they're looking at, so.
Now, there are a lot of people that think their lateral's backed up, they have sewage in there, and then when they get the camera, they realize it's wipes or tree roots, which residents are responsible for, which is why we have them do the camera work, because there are a lot
Right.
that end up being, do not qualify, and the residents can get the tree roots cut out and/or, call
And
Roto-Rooter for the wipes.
And for that reason, I'd like to see that the camera cost be an upfront cost for the,
That's why that's the reason we did that years ago, because we used to get told there was a break, and then we would check on it, and then there was no break, and then we'd go back to the resident. And that was changed many years ago for that reason.
okay, well, it's 7:02. Are there any final comments before we move on to so,
Thanks for answering all our questions, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll get some,
And all the work
we'll
that-
get some more numbers for an upcoming meeting.
Okay.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The work session is closed. We'll take a 5-minute